What is evolution? Evolution can be described as a process by which different kinds of living organisms are thought to have developed and diversified from earlier forms during the history of the Earth and are the cumulative changes in the heritable characteristics of a population. As seen in the image on the screen, our population of humans evolved from apes and the ancestors of apes. Some evidence of evolution are found in fossils such as homologous structures. Homologous structures show the similarity in characteristics as a result of descent from a common ancestor. Based on the image, homologous structures have a relation to evolution because they have a similar structure but not necessarily the same function. The main point of this is to show that they have a common ancestry. Then we have analogous structures. Analogous structures show the similarity of function and the superficial resemblance of structures that have different origins and/or ancestry. Based on the image, the wing is an analogous structure. The wing that birds, insects, bats, etc. have are analogous structures due to their similarities in function in allowing the organism to fly, as seen in the purple regions of the image.
In the early 19th century, there were many attempts to explain how certain species came about existing. Many of them were discredited. An example of a discredited theory revolved around the inheritance of acquired traits, which was created by Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. He thought that animals would change based on the environment, causing the physical state of the organism to then transform. However, this meant that animals could consciously choose which part of their body needed to be changed, which is what added to the inaccuracy of the theory. Lamarck thought that these changes would occur to organs or parts of the body which would then enlarge with use or shrink due to them becoming obsolete. Lamarck also believed that these changes could be inherited within species. The most well-known example of this theory is the lengthening of the giraffe's neck. Lamarck believed that the giraffe's constant need to reach food higher in the trees caused their neck to lengthen. Lamarck also believed that the natural selection played a role in the passing down of necessary traits, such as the longer necks. But he never really thought that natural selection was a major part in evolution. Another widely known theory is Darwin's theory of evolution and natural selection. He was not the first person to come up with this concept, however, he did popularize and gather credible and accurate evidence to support the theory of natural selection being a major part of evolution. The most common example of natural selection was the Galapagos finches. Darwin's previous knowledge of the finches in South America was that there was only one type of bird, but a collection of finches from each island revealed that 13 other species of the same finch existed, which had different beak sizes and shapes. He observed that each bird would eat different things with their specified beaks, showing that the type of beak a finch had was determined by the environment. The bird whose beak was the most successful to eat in the area was the one that lived to pass down its genes. Darwin concluded that when the finches migrated to different islands, they adapted based on the area that they ended up in, and then changed anatomically to better survive in their new environment. Darwin came to understand that each species had individuals with different qualities that gave way to genetic variation, making it possible for a species to change over time through reproduction between specific genes that so happened to be the most successful.
In evolution, there's adaptive radiation, which is once a population is started in a new area, organisms begin to develop unique niches due to their isolated locations. Over time, unique adaptations are formed to survive those specific environments that they inhabit in. This can be supported by natural selection and lead to speciation. The definition of natural selection is a tendency for nature to play a part in which genes get passed on to the next generation. This is basically the strongest surviving type of idea. Nature either selects for or against certain traits. For example, like mentioned before, a bacterial colony is infecting somewhere in your body. You treat it with antibiotics. The bacteria who are not resistant to it die off, while the ones who are survive and keep breeding. We then end up with a large population of those who are resistant to the antibiotics, and those who are not are mostly gone. Another example, like shown in the picture, there are brown beetles that blend into the surrounding area. So they have better and therefore will survive longer. So they will have more opportunities to breed and therefore more of them in the gene pool. Then, in that process of natural selection, speciation is involved. The definition of speciation is that new species that go through a series of events have new offsprings that cannot reproduce with old species, which then alters the way genes are interacting, which is change of original traits direct evolution, and this could involve environments. So, shown in the picture, you see a chain of wolf ancestry. So, as the population continues to evolve in this manner, it could experience speciation, the process in which they split into different species. A species is defined as a group of organisms that can freely breed together in nature. So, speciation will be when the groups with different traits in a species can no longer breed together. An example of this speciation would be wolves with the right genes to be able to domesticated splitting up from the rest of the pack and eventually become the first dogs. We can consider this macroevolution. So enough microevolutions can end up becoming a macroevolution as they are essentially the same process but over different time periods. So the image shown, you can see that the wolf ancestry develops down to a modern wolf into like herding of dogs, which are different pools of species. Ways in which speciation occurs is when a species becomes isolated, which then limit the variation of genes. So this variation could have occurred in many ways. So there is geographic isolation, which is physically separates the species through islands, small population, different environments, and the species becomes unique. So in the image shows how geographic isolation have some species of porkfish. However, with different genes, all because they inhibit in different locations. Then there is behavior isolation, the process some animals go through to mate. If failed, you can reproduce. For example, in the image shown, it shows the bobo birds. Birds, even though same species, don't mate with all because they have different types of behavioral patterns, such as the bobo birds. They have unique blue feet that attract their mates. And that's how they select their mates, only after an elaborate courtship ritual, which is unique to them. Then there is temporal isolation, which is the timing of mating. If failed, no gene share will occur. So here I have an example of toads. So even when they are in the same species, the different time zones of mating makes them incapable of having offsprings together. So where the American toad mates in the summertime, only the Fowler's toads mate in the late summer, therefore not being able to mate with one another. Then there's gametic isolation, which is the offsprings is fine but cannot produce any further offsprings. So here I have an example of a sea cucumber. So they release their sperm and eggs into the open water. So the only way to reproduce is by the chemical markers that specific species reproduce and match to the same species. Then there's mechanical isolation, which is not able to mate with different species because it's physically limited. So here I have an example of an elephant and a mouse. So an elephant is really incapable of mating with a mouse because they physically cannot due to their different size variations. But there's also the exceptions of a wolf and a dog. So a wolf can mate with a dog, but specifically the wolf, because of its large proportion, has to be the female of the mating process.
I will be talking about bacteria adaptation. Bacteria is defined as a member of large group or unicellular organisms that have cell walls but lack organelles and an organized nucleus, including some that can cause disease. When antibiotics are put together with bacteria, the bacteria is theoretically killed. In reality, variants that are less harmful die off and more tolerant ones survive. Next generations have this tolerance, and the antibiotics used are no longer effective for this sample of bacteria. Generally, bacteria can have two different types of resistances, and they can be explained with an example of a specific antibiotic. Penicillin was the first antibiotic in 1929, and the development of resistance is frequent.
Examples of adaptation are natural resistance and acquired resistance. Natural resistance. Gram-negative bacteria can be resistant because it has a natural outer membrane, making it harder for penicillin to get through to the victim's center. Acquired resistance. The genetic makeup of bacterial genome is changed, causing there to be resistance to antibiotics. A mutation can be passed down to future generations, which is why current antibiotics can become useless in the future. Mutations are too fast-paced for both humans and antibiotics to keep up with. Second, antibiotics come with changes in temperature, pH, and other factors of its surroundings. Lastly, as a result of sudden change in the environment, they can control the expression or non-expression of hidden or inactive genes.
These are all points that add to the concept of evolution. Even though it might not be completely agreed upon, it is still the most widely accepted explanation for the creation of different species.